No. The door. It's locked.
You look afraid, Faustina, but there's no need to be.
God, this can't be happening.
It's just you and me now, and there's nothing you can do.
No.
My life began inside the church walls, or so it felt. From the moment I could walk, Sunday wasn't just a day, it was church day. In our home, everything revolved around our faith. We were Catholic, and not just in name. We lived it, breathed it, and every corner of our house echoed with prayers and hymns. Mama and Papa, they were the pillars of our faith. Papa, with his strong voice, leading prayers before every meal and every morning. Mama, quieter, but her devotion was a steady flame. She taught me my first prayers, her fingers tracing the cross on my forehead. Our house wasn't just a house, it was the little church itself. Every morning, before the sun fully woke up, we would gather in the living room, kneel on the cool tile floor, and pray. The rosary beads would slip through our fingers, a familiar rhythm in the stillness of dawn. Church wasn't just something we did, it was who we were. From the vibrant colours of my Sunday dresses Mama painstakingly sewed, to the smell of incense that clung to our clothes after Mass, everything about our life was intertwined with the church. Weekdays were spent preparing for Sunday, and Sundays were spent in God's house. I loved the church, I truly did. As a little girl, the stained glass windows were like magical portals, casting coloured light that danced across the pews. The hymns, sung out loud by everyone, filled me with a feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than myself. I remember watching the altar servers, their crisp white robes and serious faces as they assisted the priest. They moved with such purpose, such grace. I wanted to be one of them. When I was finally old enough, I asked Father Michael if I could become an altar server. My heart pounded as I waited for his answer. He smiled, a warm, kind smile I trusted instantly. He said, "Faustina, your faith shines brightly. Of course you can serve." That day was a day of immense pride for me. Donning the white robe for the first time, I felt like I was stepping into a sacred role. I learned the rituals, the responses, the careful movements needed at the altar. Every Sunday, I served with focus and joy. I felt closer to God when I was there, assisting in the Holy Mass. As I grew older, my involvement deepened. It wasn't just about serving at the altar anymore. I joined the Catholic Youth Organisation, CYO. It was more than just a group, it was a family. We met every week, not just for prayers and Bible study, but for community work, for supporting each other. We visited the sick, helped the elderly in our neighbourhood, and organised charity drives. It felt good to put our faith into action, to live the teachings we heard every Sunday. In CYO, I found my voice and my friends. Justin was one of them. He was my best friend, my confidant. We'd known each other since we were children, growing up in the same parish, attending the same church. Justin, he wasn't always as outwardly expressive about his faith as I was. He was quieter, more thoughtful, but his faith was just as strong, just as real. Whenever I felt overwhelmed or doubts crept into my mind, it was Justin who reminded me to trust in God. "Have faith, Faustina," he'd say, his voice calm and steady. "God has a plan." His words were always a balm to my sometimes anxious spirit. He was my anchor, my support, always there to listen, to understand, to remind me of what truly mattered. Within the church community, there were many figures we looked up to, but one name resonated with respect and admiration: Father Clement. He wasn't yet a father. He was a seminarian, still in training. But even as a seminarian, he carried himself with a quiet authority, a gentle wisdom that drew people to him. He was young, yes, but there was something in his eyes, in his voice, that spoke of deep understanding, of genuine faith. Everyone admired Father Clement. The older women in the parish would speak of his sermons, how insightful and moving they were. The men talked about his knowledge of Scripture, his dedication to his studies. Even the children seemed drawn to his gentle nature. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, feel valued. He was kind, always ready to listen, to offer a word of encouragement, a prayer. To me, Father Clement was a figure of pure goodness. He embodied everything I admired in a person of faith. He seemed so dedicated, so devout, so completely committed to God's path. When he spoke, it was with such conviction, such sincerity. I listened to his teachings, absorbing every word. He seemed to understand things on a deeper level, to have a connection to God that was truly special. Like everyone else in our community, I trusted Father Clement implicitly. He was a man of God, dedicated to serve in the church, to guiding us all on our spiritual journeys. He was someone to look up to learn from, to respect. In my young, faithful heart, Father Clement represented everything good and holy within the church. He was a beacon of faith, and I, along with everyone else, held him in the highest regard. In my world, the church was safe, and those who served within it, especially someone like Father Clement, were to be trusted without question. This was the world I knew, the world I believed in, the world that shaped me. This was my life of faith, a life I cherished, a life that I would soon learn was about to be tested in ways I could never have imagined. It started subtly, so subtly that at first I almost didn't register it as anything out of the ordinary. It was after a weekday evening mass. I was tidying up the altar area with the other servers when Father Clement approached. He had that gentle smile on his face, the one that made everyone feel at ease. "Faustina," he said, his voice soft but clear, "could you do me a small favour? My room is a bit untidy. I have some important papers I need to sort through, but I'm expecting a visitor shortly. Would you mind helping me tidy up a little, just for a few minutes?" It seemed like a simple request. Seminarians lived modestly within the church compound. Helping to tidy a room seemed well within the realm of church duties, especially for someone like me who was always eager to be helpful. Besides, it was Father Clement. There was no reason to say no. "Of course, Father Clement," I replied, feeling a little flutter of pride that he had asked me specifically. He thanked me, his eyes meeting mine for a moment longer than necessary, or so it felt in retrospect. I told the other servers I'd be back shortly and followed Father Clement towards the living quarters. His room was simple, as I expected. A small bed, a desk cluttered with books and papers, a wardrobe. It wasn't particularly messy, just lived in. "Thank you so much, Faustina," he said again, gesturing around the room. If you could just straighten things up a bit, especially the desk. I need to find those notes for my sermon." I started to work, straightening books, stacking papers, feeling a sense of purpose in being helpful. Father Clement was moving around the room too, ostensibly looking for his notes, but he kept getting closer. It was a small room, of course, but there was plenty of space, yet he seemed to always be near me. Then it happened. I was bending down to pick up a book that had slipped under the desk when I felt it. A hand lightly, briefly, on my waist, just for a second. It was gone as quickly as it came. I straightened up, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. I looked at Father Clement. He was standing near the window, looking out, seemingly oblivious. "Did you find them, Father Clement?" I asked, my voice sounding a little higher than usual. He turned back, that gentle smile still in place. "Find what, Faustina?" he asked, his eyes wide and innocent. "Your sermon notes?" "Oh yes, they're somewhere here," he said vaguely, gesturing again at the desk. He didn't mention anything about touching me. Perhaps I had imagined it. Perhaps it was just an accidental brush in the small space. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. Father Clement was a man of God. He couldn't do anything inappropriate. I pushed the thought away, trying to focus on tidying the desk, trying to ignore the lingering warmth where his hand had been. But a seed of unease had been planted. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it was there. After that day, things shifted. Father Clement started finding reasons to talk to me more often. At first it seemed normal. He'd ask about my studies, about CYO, about my family. He was always kind, always encouraging. But there was a new intensity in his gaze when he spoke to me. He'd hold my eye contact a little too long, his smile a little too fixed. He started making comments too. Little comments, seemingly innocent on the surface, but they made me feel uncomfortable. He'd say things like, "You're growing into a fine young woman, Faustina," or "You're becoming so mature, so responsible." Again, nothing overtly wrong, but the way he said them, the way he looked at me while saying them, it sent a shiver of unease down my spine. One day, after Mass, he stopped me as I was leaving the church. "Faustina, could I have a word?" I nodded, my heart already starting to beat faster. He led me to a quieter corner of the churchyard, away from the bustle of people. "You know, Faustina," he began, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "You're still quite young, of course." He paused, looking at me intently. "But in a few years, in just a few short years, you'll be old enough." "Old enough for what?" The question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. His eyes were fixed on me, and there was something in them, something that made me want to shrink away. "Old enough for what, Father Clement?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. He just smiled, that same fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll understand when you're older, Faustina. Just remember what I said." And then he patted my shoulder, a little too firmly, a little too long, and walked away, leaving me standing there frozen, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I started keeping my distance after that. I made excuses to avoid being alone with him. I stopped volunteering to help with tasks that might put me in his path. I told myself I was being silly, overreacting, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. Then came the day with the drink. It was during a CYO meeting in the church hall. Father Clement had come to speak to us about Lent. After his talk, he brought out a tray of drinks, small plastic cups filled with a sweet-smelling, brightly coloured juice. He offered them to everyone, smiling warmly. When he reached me, he held out a cup. "For you, Faustina," he said, his eyes lingering on mine. You've been working so hard with CYO. You deserve a treat." I hesitated. The drink looked artificial, too bright, but it was being offered by Father Clement. It would be impolite to refuse. As I reached for the cup, Justin appeared beside me. "Hey, Faustina," he said, his usual cheerful self. "What's this?" He glanced at the tray of drinks. "Looks interesting." Before I could react, Justin had reached out and taken the cup from Father Clement's hand. "Thanks, Father Clement," Justin said, giving him a bright smile and taking a large gulp. Father Clement's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, then returned, even brighter than before. "Enjoy," he said, his voice a little too enthusiastic. Justin finished the drink quickly, then started chatting with me about the meeting. A few minutes later, Justin suddenly went pale. He swayed on his feet, grabbing my arm for support. "Faustina." "I don't feel so good," he mumbled, his voice weak. "Everything's spinning." I helped him sit down, his skin clammy, his breathing shallow. He looked genuinely unwell. Several other CYO members rushed over, concerned. We got him some water, and slowly after a while he started to recover. But for a good half hour he was really sick, just minutes after drinking that juice. As I looked at Justin, pale and shaken, a cold wave of suspicion washed over me. The touch on my waist, the unsettling comments, the old enough remark. And now, this drink. Was it possible? Could Father Clement have? The thought was too terrible to fully form in my mind, but the seed of unease that had been planted had now sprouted, sending roots deep into my heart. The first warning had been given, and I, in my naivete, in my unwavering trust, was only just beginning to understand that the world I believed in, the world of unwavering faith and goodness, might have cracks in it, cracks that ran deeper and darker than I could ever have imagined. The innocence of my life of faith was starting to fray at the edges, replaced by a chilling premonition of something terrible lurking beneath the surface of everything I thought I knew. The summons came from Thomas, the head altar server. He approached me after Sunday Mass, his expression unusually serious. "Faustina, Father Clement needs someone to tidy his room again. Can you do it this afternoon?" My heart sank. Just the mention of Father Clement sent a ripple of anxiety through me. I had been actively avoiding him since the incident with the drink, making sure to be surrounded by others whenever he was near, inventing excuses to steer clear of any one-on-one interactions. But an instruction from the altar server leader felt different. It felt like a direct duty, harder to refuse. "This afternoon?" I repeated, trying to buy myself time to think, to find a way out. I had planned to help Mama with chores. It was a weak excuse, and I knew it. Thomas frowned slightly. "It's important, Faustina. He needs it done today, and it's just tidying up like before. It won't take long." He paused, then added, "Actually, I'll come with you. I have to drop off some altar linens near his room anyway. We'll go together, and then you can quickly tidy up while I do my errand." The idea of Thomas being there offered a sliver of relief. If he was there, even briefly, Father Clement couldn't do anything untoward. Maybe it was just my anxiety making me see shadows where there were none. Maybe I was overreacting to the drink incident, to his comments, to that fleeting touch. Maybe this was just a normal task, and my fear was unfounded. "Okay," I agreed, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "This afternoon, then." Later, as arranged, Thomas and I walked towards Father Clement's quarters. My stomach was churning with a mixture of dread and a strange, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. Maybe this was a chance to prove to myself that I was being overly suspicious, that Father Clement was just as good and kind as I had always believed. We reached his door. Thomas knocked, and Father Clement opened it, his face lighting up when he saw us. "Thomas, Faustina, good afternoon," he greeted us, his voice warm and welcoming. Come in, come in." We stepped inside. The room looked much the same as before. Books, papers, a simple bed. "Father Clement, I just need to drop off these linens," Thomas said, holding up a neatly folded pile of white cloth. "Faustina is here to help tidy up your room as you requested." "Excellent, excellent," Father Clement said, taking the linens from Thomas. He placed them on a nearby chair. Then he turned to Thomas, his expression changing, becoming slightly more urgent. "Thomas, actually, could you do me another favour? I realised I'm missing a very important book. It's in the sacristy, I think. It's quite heavy, a large leather-bound Bible. Could you possibly fetch it for me? It would be a great help." The sacristy was at the other end of the church building, quite a walk, and Bibles, especially large ones, were indeed heavy. It seemed like a plausible request, but something in Father Clement's eyes, a subtle shift in his demeanour, made my unease flare up again. Thomas hesitated for a moment. "The large Bible from the sacristy? Are you sure it's there, Father Clement? I thought those were usually kept in the altar room." No, I distinctly remember seeing it in the sacristy just this morning," Father Clement insisted, his voice a little too insistent. "Please, Thomas, it's quite important. I need to check something in it for my evening sermon. It would save me a trip later." Thomas, ever helpful and obedient, nodded. "All right, Father Clement, I'll go get it for you." He turned to me. "I'll be back in a few minutes, Faustina." And then he left. As soon as Thomas was out of the room, the atmosphere changed. The warmth in Father Clement's eyes seemed to vanish, replaced by something colder, more calculating. He closed the door behind Thomas, a little too quickly, a little too firmly. "So, Faustina," he said, turning to face me, his voice now lower, the gentle tone gone. "Just you and me now." My blood ran cold. The door. He had closed the door, and Thomas was gone. Panic seized me, a suffocating wave that made it hard to breathe. I suddenly knew, with chilling certainty, that I was trapped. "Father Clement," I stammered, taking a step back, my voice trembling. I should just start tidying up then." I tried to sound normal, to appear calm, but my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't move, just stood there, blocking the space between me and the door. "Not so fast, Faustina," he said, taking a step closer. His eyes were no longer kind, no longer gentle. They were predatory. "Father Clement, please," I begged, my voice breaking. "I just need to tidy up. Thomas will be back soon." It was a desperate, pathetic plea. He just chuckled, a low, unsettling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Thomas won't be back for a while, Faustina, and even if he does, we can have a little private moment before then, can't we?" He took another step closer, and I stumbled back until my back hit the wall. I was cornered. I knew what was coming. The warnings, the unease, the drink, it all coalesced into a terrifying reality. This was not the kind, gentle Father Clement everyone admired. This was someone else. Someone dark, someone dangerous. "No, Father Clement, please, no!" I cried, tears welling up in my eyes. I tried to push past him to reach the door, but he was too strong. He grabbed my arms, his grip tight, painful. I struggled, kicking, pulling, desperate to break free, but it was no use. He was too strong, and I was trapped. He overpowered me quickly, brutally. My pleas, my struggles were meaningless against his strength, against his will. The room seemed to spin, the sounds of my own choked cries echoing in my ears. It was happening. The unthinkable, the impossible was happening. Then it was over. Just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I lay there, trembling, broken, numb. He moved away, and for a moment I couldn't even look at him. When I finally dared to glance up, I saw him kneeling beside the bed. not kneeling towards me, but facing the small crucifix on the wall. He was kneeling as if in prayer, as if nothing had just happened, as if he could simply kneel and pray and erase what he had done. Then he stood up and turned to me. His expression was almost normal, almost gentle again. But the darkness in his eyes was still there, lurking beneath the surface. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wad of money. He held it out to me. "Here," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, almost matter-of-fact. "4 pills, just in case." Pills. 4 pills. As if money could erase what he had done. As if a few pills could make it all go away. As if my pain, my violation, my shattered innocence could be bought and paid for with a few crumpled notes. I stared at the money, then at him, my mind blank, my body numb. I felt nothing, just emptiness. A vast, echoing emptiness where my faith, my trust, my very sense of self had once been. Without a word, I stood up, my legs shaky, unsteady. I walked to the door, opened it, and walked out, leaving him kneeling there in his room with his crucifix and his money, leaving behind the shattered remains of my life of faith, stepping out into a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly, irrevocably different. I walked out, leaving a part of myself behind in that room, trapped forever in the horror of what had just happened, and I walked away, into the silence, into the shock, into the numb aftermath of being trapped. The days that followed were not days at all, really. They were just blurs, one indistinguishable from the next. The world had become muted, muffled, as if a thick curtain had been drawn between me and everything real. I moved through my life like a ghost, going through the motions, but feeling utterly detached, utterly empty inside. Church became a place to avoid. The very building, once a sanctuary, now felt tainted, poisoned. The hymns, once comforting, now echoed with a hollowness that mirrored my own soul. The sight of the altar where I had once served with such devotion now brought a wave of nausea, a bitter taste of betrayal. I couldn't go back, not yet, maybe not ever. Sundays, once the heart of my week, became days of heavy dread. Mum and Papa noticed my absence from Mass, of course. They asked questions, their brows furrowed with concern. "Faustina, are you feeling unwell? You missed church again. Is everything all right, Nkem? My dear." I offered vague excuses, headaches, stomach troubles, tiredness, anything to avoid the truth. How could I tell them? How could I even begin to explain the darkness that had consumed me, the shattering of everything we held sacred? The words wouldn't come. They felt like lead weights in my throat, impossible to utter. So I retreated into silence, into my carefully constructed wall of numbness. Father Clement. He tried to reach me. At first it was subtle. Missed calls on my phone, messages that popped up on the screen, chillingly polite, chillingly normal. "Faustina, hope you are well. We missed you at CYO. Is everything all right? Thinking of you in my prayers." Prayers. The word felt like a mockery, a cruel twist of the knife. Then, when I ignored the calls and messages, he became more direct. He started appearing in places I frequented, seemingly by chance. Outside our house when I went to fetch water. Near the market when I ran errands for Mama. Each chance encounter sent a fresh jolt of fear through me, tightening the knot of anxiety in my stomach. He would approach with that sickeningly familiar smile, his voice dripping with false concern. "Faustina, my dear Faustina, why are you avoiding me? Have I done something to upset you?" He acted as if nothing had happened, as if we were still in the same innocent world we had both inhabited before. His denial was a second violation, a twisting of the knife deeper into the wound. I would mumble a hurried greeting, my eyes fixed on the ground, and try to escape as quickly as possible, my heart pounding with a frantic rhythm. He never pushed, never confronted me directly in public. It was always veiled, always suggestive, always leaving me with that cold, clammy feeling of being watched, being hunted. Weeks bled into each other, marked only by the slow, agonizing crawl of time. Then the physical changes started, a persistent nausea that clung to me from morning till night, a strange, unfamiliar fatigue that settled deep in my bones, and then my monthly cycle, usually as reliable as the rising sun, was late, days late, a week late. A cold dread began to unfurl in my stomach, a new layer of fear added to the already heavy weight I carried. A terrible, unwelcome suspicion began to take root. Could it be? Could something else, something even more life-altering be growing inside me? A consequence of that violation? The thought was terrifying. Shame, fear, confusion, all swirled together into a nauseating mix. I couldn't tell Mama. I couldn't tell Papa. Who could I tell? Who would understand? Who would believe me? Justin. He was the only one. My best friend, my confidant, the one who had always been there, always listened, always reminded me to trust in God. But even with Justin, the words felt impossible to say. This was too big, too shameful, too everything. But the physical symptoms were growing stronger, harder to ignore. The nausea, the fatigue, the growing anxiety. I knew I had to know. I had to face the possibility, however terrifying. One afternoon, when Mama was at the market, I slipped out of the house. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the small amount of money I had saved. I went to the pharmacy, my heart hammering in my chest, and bought a pregnancy test. The pharmacist, a kind older woman, looked at me with gentle eyes, sensing my distress. She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod of understanding. Back home, in the stifling privacy of our small latrine, I followed the instructions, my hands trembling so violently I could barely manage. Then I waited, the longest few minutes of my life, staring at the small plastic window, willing it to show me what I desperately hoped wasn't true. The lines appeared slowly, stark and undeniable. 2 lines, positive. The world seemed to tilt, to spin. The small latrine walls closed in on me, suffocating. Positive. It was real. Not just a fear, not just a suspicion. Real. A life growing inside me, conceived in violence, in violation. A life that was also a constant living reminder of the horror I had endured. I sat there for a long time, on the cold concrete floor, staring at the positive test, tears silently streaming down my face. Numbness gave way to a hollow ache, a deep, bone-deep weariness of spirit. I knew I had to tell Justin. He deserved to know. And I desperately needed someone to share this impossible burden with. I found him later that evening near the church, ironically, the place where our friendship had always felt safest. He saw my face, my tear-streaked eyes, and his usual cheerful demeanour vanished instantly. "Faustina, what is it? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak at first. The words were still lodged in my throat. I just handed him the pregnancy test, the plastic window still displaying its stark, undeniable truth. He took it, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened, realization dawning, horror creeping into his expression. He looked from the test to my face, back to the test, his silence stretching, heavy and thick with unspoken understanding. "Faustina," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "Oh, Faustina." His eyes were filled with a mixture of fury and a deep, aching compassion. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He saw the truth in my eyes, in the silent devastation that radiated from me. He understood. Rage flickered in his eyes. Father Clement, that monster! His fists clenched, his body tense with anger. We should go to the elders, to the priest. We should expose him. I shook my head, tears welling up again. No, Justin, Number, I can't. The shame, the whispers, they will blame me. They will say I tempted him. They will ruin me. The thought of public exposure, of the inevitable judgment of our community, was almost as terrifying as what had already happened. He was silent for a moment, his anger warring with his concern for me. Then his voice softened, becoming gentle, hesitant. Faustina, have you thought about ending the pregnancy? The words hung in the air, stark and sharp, cutting through the heavy silence. Ending the pregnancy. It was a word whispered in shadows, a forbidden topic in our strict Catholic community. But Justin, in his desperate attempt to help, had voiced the unthinkable. Think about it, Faustina, he continued, his voice low, pleading. Think about the shame, the rejection you will face. A child? Without a father? Conceived like this? It will ruin your life, Faustina. It will ruin everything. His words were meant to be helpful, to offer a solution, a way out, but they felt like another trap, another layer of fear and despair tightening around me. Shame, rejection, ruin. These words echoed in my mind, amplifying the already overwhelming sense of being trapped. I looked at Justin, his face etched with worry, with a desperate desire to protect me, but his words offered no comfort, no solace. They only underscored the impossible situation I was in, trapped. That's all I felt, trapped by what had happened to me, trapped by the life growing inside me, trapped by the shame and fear of our community, trapped by the impossible choices that lay before me, trapped in a silent battle with no weapons, no allies, and no clear path to victory. My life of faith, once a source of strength and solace, now felt like the bars of my prison, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone, facing a darkness deeper and more profound than I could ever have imagined. My silent battle had just begun. To be continued. Don't miss out the next part. Please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell